We ask out of respect for our speaker to please remain seated until she has finished. It is my pleasure to introduce Lucy.
I'm Lucy, and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm really blessed to be here. But first, I'd like to congratulate you, Ozzy. 1 year is a huge deal. And Linda, 10 years, you're in double digits. That's really fun. And welcome to the newcomers. And I really hope that you keep coming back and that you might hear something that gives you hope. I hope everyone finds some hope tonight, because that's what I found when I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. But first, I'd like to thank my beautiful friend Nan for asking me to speak and for carrying the message, for being here and having a platform where we can share our experience, strength, and hope. And you know, as I get up here and I think about doing this, I think of my time here and listening to other people's stories, and I have found a lot of encouragement, and I keep coming back here because this is where I found my solution. And today I don't drink. My sobriety date is October 31st, 2006. And I always think, why did I get sober on Halloween? You know, it was just the beginning of the party season. But you know, I've never regretted that. And I can tell you that I don't know that I really had a whole lot to do with that decision that day, and I'll talk about that just a little bit as we get going. And you know, what I was told is that I would share with you what it was like, what I did, and what it's like today. And I don't spend a lot of time talking about my drinking days because, quite frankly, they aren't really all that interesting, and it might be different than your story, but for me, it's what's inside. And that's where I can find the identification. Is like, I know when I first came in here, I was at a meeting, there were a lot of men, and it was at noon. I would go on my lunch hour, and a lot of them had lived on the street, and I just could not identify with that at first. But I stayed long enough that I began to hear their stories, and we were not that different. And then I heard things like, there were these things called yets. And I go, what the heck is a yet? And then I found out that yets are the things that haven't yet happened to me. And I may not have lived on the street. I may not have had a DUI, but that doesn't mean I couldn't live on the street. And it doesn't mean I couldn't have had a DUI, because I did drink and drive. And usually I would have somebody else drive, though. You know, I knew enough, except when I was living by myself at the end and I ran out of booze and I had to go drive. So anyway, I'll just tell you a little bit about my background. I grew up in Michigan. I grew up in a very large family. There were 14 kids in my family, and 7 boys, 7 girls, and that was one mom, one dad. We were not a blended family. I didn't know anybody divorced until I was about 22 years old. I didn't know what stepsisters were, and I remember when I first heard about that, I go, Cinderella, Cinderella. And that's like, my life was pretty stable. I grew up in I would say a really remarkable family, an unusual family. And I had really great parents that taught me to help others. They taught me about faith. They taught me, if we had a fight in our family, and then you can imagine there were some fights with that many kids, we always had to make up. So I always knew you had to, you know, forgive people and move through and get there. But it wasn't always easy. And one of the things that I had in that family is I never felt like I fit in. I never felt like I fit into my family, like I felt like I was so different and just so odd. And there's many reasons for that. And, you know, we can do all the therapy and all the things that you want, and I did a lot of that. And I'm grateful for that. And today, I stand here before you, and I think about my sobriety, and there's nothing I'm more grateful for. Because when I was drinking, I was destroying my life one day at a time. And I didn't think that at the time, but as time progressed, I began to see that. And, you know, coming from a big family like that, there was a lot of drinking in my family. My mom and dad had a drink every day. Back in those days, I think everybody kind of had a cocktail every night. But I never saw my mother and father drink excessively. But when my mom and dad would leave, there would be big parties. My brothers would have parties, and I was at the last half of the 14, and I said I would never, ever, ever drink, because when they had those parties, there were always fights. I can remember people sitting at the counter and their heads would be bleeding, and we had to clean up after the party the next day because we were the girls. And I can just remember saying, I will never drink. And I really never did drink until I was 17. I went to Europe. I went with my choir, and I went to Europe and visited all these different countries. And when I was in Germany, that was my very first drink. I had some beer, and it was so wonderful, and I loved it until I didn't love it because I dropped my glass, I broke it, I was embarrassed, I ran out of that bar. I do not know how I got back to my hotel. I had to cross this huge bridge with a huge river flowing under it, and I locked my girlfriends out of the room, and they could not get in the room till the next morning. I don't remember anything after walking out of there. I don't remember getting back to the hotel. I don't remember any of that. And, you know, you would think, okay, that was probably a blackout maybe. I don't know. It sounds like it. But, you know, I didn't drink again. I came back home, and I went into my senior year of high school, and I still didn't drink because I still didn't really want to drink because I saw alcohol as a problem. You know, it would create problems for me. But then I graduated. I went to college, and there I met my future husband, and he introduced me to drinking and a couple other things. But I liked the drinking, and I remember the first time I drank with him, we got a 6-pack, and I think he drank 2 and I drank 4. You know, I mean, like, I just right off the bat and out of the chute was ready to drink. Many of my siblings started drinking when they were in 3rd grade and when they were really, really young. And I always think that's part of why I didn't feel like I fit in, because I just didn't want to drink. I didn't party. I wasn't maybe like typical. I wanted to please my mom and dad. I loved my mom and dad. They were really, really good parents. And, but, you know, like, I did. I started drinking, and then we got married, and we had, it was wonderful. You know, I was in love, and it was great, and we partied just pretty much on the weekends, and it was pretty okay, except that I always drank too much. I always got sick, but I kept drinking. I'm never drinking again. I'm never going to drink again because I got sick. But it didn't work. I just always drank again, and I always wanted more. And my sister would have parties, and everybody brought a 5th, but then she had lots more 5ths, and so you just kept drinking. I mean, we would start at early in the evening and go till 3 in the morning. And I didn't drive. I let him drive home drunk. Anyway, I do have some notes here because sometimes I get confused and I don't want to get lost. But so I married, and I was very happy, and we had 3 children, and I love my children. They're one of the greatest gifts that I have in my life, and we were happy together. But my husband was a Vietnam vet, and for those of you that weren't around during that time, there was something called PTSD, which today we know lots about, but back then they didn't really know anything about it. And there were a lot of very difficult things that happened in our home because of PTSD and because of the Vietnam War. And, but you know, I always internalized it and thought it was me, and I just kept blaming myself. And if I would be a better wife, I'd be a better mother if I just do everything right. You know, I have a perfectionist problem. But, you know, you know, somehow, you know, you can't do everything right because that's not the way life is. There's no such thing as that perfection that I was looking for. But anyway, we decided to move to Arizona. My in-laws had mostly moved here from Michigan, and we decided to move here. And that was probably my only geographic, and my geographic wasn't because of my drinking, but my geographic was I wanted to save my marriage. I wanted everything to be okay because I love this man. He was a really good man that just had been harmed by the war. And so we moved to Arizona, and back up just one little step there. I had quit drinking, and I had quit drinking for about 10 years. So when I moved to Arizona, I was not drinking. And that probably was hard on our marriage because he was still drinking and doing other things. But somewhere along the road, I saw myself, and I go, 3 kids, drinking, this maybe isn't a good idea. Maybe I should stop. And I believe then, at that time, I do believe that I had a spiritual experience, and I did stop drinking for about a 10-year period. But let me tell you, stopping drinking alone without the program, it wasn't a lot of fun. I had a lot of insanity, and I had a lot of things to deal with because I was still dealing with what's up here. And but I'm really grateful at the same time that I didn't drink in front of my children, and I wasn't falling down drunk all the time. However, a year or two before we got divorced, I guess I thought it'd be a good idea to start drinking again, and I hid my wine in the closet because I didn't want my children to know I was drinking, because my oldest son maybe saw me drink, but I was always hoping he didn't really remember. But anyway, another clue that maybe drinking wasn't a good thing for me, but I still did it, and it was okay at the very onset, a little bit here, a little bit there. But then, we got divorced, and life just kind of went upside down. I was really angry, and I'm like, where are you, God? Why? I did all these things and all this stuff, and my life was kind of a mess. But then I met somebody, and I got married again, and I was having time in my life. I began to be a canyoneer. I hiked in the Grand Canyon. I've been in the wilderness. I carried 50 pounds on my back. I mean, I love the Grand Canyon. And I would hike in there, and I was having these great times and taking great trips, traveling to Costa Rica and doing all these wonderful things. However, I had started that drinking, which set off that phenomena that just takes us down this path that is so ugly. And all of a sudden, I was that person that I never thought I would be. I mean, I was drinking, I was angry, I was mean, I was nasty, I lied to my children, which probably is one of the things I'm most ashamed of, is that I lied to my children, because I used to tell them, you can do anything. If you do something, whatever happened, you can always come to me and talk to your mom, because I will always be there, I will always love you, and I'll put my arms around you. But don't ever lie to me, because then you'll have to earn my trust back. Hello? No, I'm not drinking. And then when they would confront me, I would say it was their fault, because if they would just leave me alone, I wouldn't drink. So, because it was always somebody else's fault, it wasn't my fault. Or else I made it all my fault. I was like one extreme or the other. So it was kind of a challenging time for me. And really, when my drinking, when I first came in, in my mind, I thought my drinking had only been for a few years. My mom died about 3 years before I got sober, and that's something I'm really sad about, that I was not sober with my mom. I mean, I took care of her when she was dying, and I often think about that. I am grateful that I didn't drink when I was taking care of her, but I was drunk a lot. I mean, at her funeral, I remember we had 3 busloads of people, and we went to the cemetery, and everybody was drinking. They had a kegger on the bus, and we drinking. And for some reason, I knew not to drink there. But as soon as we got to the party afterwards with 800 people there, I don't remember anything at my mother's, the celebration of her life. And I'm sorry for that, because, but that's my story, and there you go. I'm not drinking today, and you guys don't have to either. And that's the good news. You don't ever have to drink again. And that's why I want to get to the good part, which is to tell you how I did it. And but so anyway, I married this other guy, and it got pretty bad. But we were in the canyon. I do have a story. We went in the Grand Canyon, and he was a writer, and he actually wrote a story about this, and it was called The 4 Cans of Beer. And anybody who's a backpacker knows that you look at every ounce you're putting in that pack, because you don't want to be carrying a lot of weight down into that Grand Canyon, because you got to be carrying it in, you got to be carrying it out. So I thought it was a great idea to put 4 cans of beer in my backpack. That's 48 ounces. And so I put those in there, and we got to our campsite that night and pulled them out. And I go, look what I have, 4 beers for us, and I was really, really excited. So I dropped the first can, and it exploded, and that one was gone. And so that was the end of that one. Well, there were 3 left, right? Well, he got 1, I got 2. But, I think about that, and I think, at that time, I did not think that there was anything wrong with that. That didn't seem weird to me. I can tell you other drinking things I did down there. I'm lucky I was able to walk out of there. But but anyway, I did that one, and then probably one of my most demoralizing times of drinking was we were with friends down in Tucson, and this couple, and they had 2 children, and we were out in the desert, and we bought a big thing of wine for 4 of us to drink. And it was, I don't know, at some point it was getting low, there was only a little bit left. I grabbed that bottle out of my friend's hand and said, "That's mine." And I proceeded to have the rest of that wine. And I think, that's not me. I'm a really nice, kind person. I mean, if you know me, that's who I am. That's not me. And the next day, I tried to find out what I did because I don't remember. To this day, I do not know what I did. Nobody would tell me. And I tried, I wasn't in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I had learned as a little child that you make things right. And, it's one amends I've never been able to make. I've tried to call that person. They won't return my calls. But you know what? I do a living amends today. I don't grab wine bottles out of people's hands, and I don't drink anymore. So that way I can show up and be there and be present. And then when I wake up in the morning, I know what I did. And that's a really, really beautiful thing for me. So anyway, so I'm married, and I've had a job now for 20 years. And I don't drink on my first job, but my husband and I, we had a business in downtown, and I would drink on that job. And he kind of got fed up with it, and he wouldn't let me bring wine anymore, so I'd bring little tiny wine bottles. And our business was right near the middle school. And another little evidence that maybe I had a problem with alcohol is I had that little tiny wine bottle in a brown paper bag, believe that or not. Believe that or not. And I walked down, and I was walking by the middle school, and I saw these young children sitting there, middle school students. I thought, there's something wrong with this picture. This is not a good thing. But guess what? I did not stop drinking. I kept drinking. And in fact, I drank for 3 more years after that. But eventually my husband became really fed up with me, and he just left me a note on the counter and said, "I'm leaving." And he walked out on me, and I was going to show him, though, that next day I got up and I said, "I'm not going to drink." So I marked it on the calendar, and I think I went 5 days without drinking. And then for the next almost 2 years, I drank every single night, passed out in bed every single night alone, and it was horrible. And at the time, it didn't seem horrible, but it was pretty horrible when I look back on it. And it was, more alone than I'd ever been in my whole entire life, because I remember I came from that big family, and I'd gotten married. So I'd always been around people. I'd never been alone. And it was scary, but I had my bottle, and it took care of everything, because you know what? It really was my solution in the end. In the end, it really was my solution, because I didn't feel anymore. I didn't care what you thought. I didn't care about what anybody thought about anything. And again, if you knew me before, and even now, that's so far from who I am. I care about people I love. I have a great capacity to love, and my heart is big. And one thing I forgot to do, and I'm going to stop right now, because I'm going to tell you why. God is present in this room. And I usually stop for a minute before I ever share, and I ask that he be present, and that I take a moment to have that conscious contact with him. And then I always want to remember that maybe you would find him now. It says that in our big book. It says, "May you find him now." And I promise you, if you keep seeking him, you will find him. And in one of the gifts of our program is that you can have your own conception of God. And he's so big that his love is bigger than anything that you can even imagine. So I'm sorry to do that, but I failed to do that at the very beginning, so I just back myself up a moment. So anyway, that's pretty much all I have to tell you about my story. It's nothing really extraordinary or anything like that, but it was low enough for me. I was at the very bottom of the pit, and I'm fortunate I did not lose my job. I was able to stay at that job and retire from that job. And that's not because I did anything. I mean, I did. I was a good employee. I worked hard. But I can tell you that in those last few years when I was drinking every single night and passing out every single night, I was not a good employee the next day, because I was hungover and I had cloudy thinking, and it was really awful. But I'm going to tell you the way I did it, and that was by working these beautiful steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and reading this big book and doing big book studies and getting a sponsor. A sponsor saved my life. The way I came into the rooms was my daughter was going to college here locally. I think about her because she's my youngest daughter, and when I got divorced, I caused so much harm to her, and I caused harm to all my children, but particularly to her. She was young, and I think about that sometimes, and I wish that I could undo that harm. And the only way I know how to undo that harm is to not pick up another drink, because if I pick up another drink, all bets are off. My other daughter had 2 children. They were really little. They were just like, my grandson had just been born, and my other granddaughter was about 15 months old, and she said, "Mom, if you don't quit drinking, you're not going to get to have these grandkids." And I can tell you, as much as I love my children, when you have grandchildren, like, your heart bursts open. And I love those kids like beyond anything, but I couldn't stop drinking. I couldn't stop drinking for them. I couldn't stop for my kids. I couldn't stop for anybody. So when I came in here, that is one thing I did understand, is that it had to be for me, and so that I could be a better person, and so that I could be the person that God created me to be to begin with. And so what I did is, I looked for the similarities, not the differences. That's what I was told to do. And as I told you at the beginning, at that meeting, I couldn't identify. But then if you stay long enough, I look out here and there's a whole sea of people, and all those people down there, hi guys, and I know a few people that are in there, in that little camera box there. And all I know is that if you just keep coming back and you do just a little bit every single day, your life gets better. I have a friend, he had 50 years of sobriety, and he used to always say, "I just do a little bit every single day." And he's got 50 years of sobriety. I just do a little bit every day. Doesn't try to do it perfectly, just does a little bit every day. And that's what I try to do. And so I start off, I do the steps, and I'm going to take you through the steps. I know we read them. I love that. It says, "Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path." Thoroughly followed our path. Doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It just means you have to be willing to do what we do. And you look around and you look for people who have what you want, or people that are staying sober, people that are doing the deal, and go up and shake their hand and ask them for help. And we rarely will, if we can't help you, we'll help you find somebody that can help you. And I know that to be true because it's happened for me in my life. So as step 1 says, we, not by yourself, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and our lives had become unmanageable. And that morning when I woke up at 2 a.m., somehow I knew that I was an alcoholic. And I can tell you, I don't know how I knew that, and I don't know it the way the book tells us, but inside of me I knew that. And I called in sick to work that day, and I went to an AA meeting. And at that AA meeting, 3 people came up and talked to me, and I believe they are the ones that saved my life that day. I had gone to a few meetings before that, but this is the meeting where my life was changed. And one of those people was from an Al-Anon meeting that I had met. My daughter was going to that school. I don't even know if I told you this already, but she had to go to Al-Anon meetings, and went to that Al-Anon meeting, and I met some people that were in AA. I didn't know I was an alcoholic, and I thought it was kind of weird that she would go to college and they would send her to an Al-Anon meeting, but I went with her. And I'm really grateful that I did, because that was my first introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous, or that there was even such a thing as a program. And, I had lots of people in my family that drank, and I even have a couple siblings that went to AA, but nobody ever talked about it. And in my family, every single person drinks except my one brother who died. He had Down syndrome, and he was a perfect angel. And he didn't drink, but the rest of us, all of us drank. And some of us more than others. And but somehow I knew that I was an alcoholic, but you know what I couldn't really get was the unmanageable. I had I was separated from my husband. We never did get back together, and we were supposed to be building this house together, and I was building a brand new house that we were supposed to move in together. And then he backed out of the deal, and I was still drinking. I drank through that whole thing until 2 weeks before I moved into that house. So I've never drank in my new house, so I'm so happy about that. And I'll tell you when I saw my unmanageability. It was when I began to unpack the boxes, because those boxes were in such disarray, it was unbelievable. And my kids, I've helped them move many times, and I'm known to be a really great packer, and I'm very organized, and I can help people. And so I don't know what I was doing. Ding, ding, ding. I was drinking. And that is when I actually saw my unmanageability, is that I was just like, wow, look at me. I'm an organized person, but look at the mess that I've created here. So anyway, it takes a lot of honesty to do that first step, and there's that how, and it's, you probably have heard it, but it's honest, open, and willing. But we have to be rigorously honest, but we have to be honest first with ourselves before we can be honest with anyone else. And I had to admit that I was an alcoholic. And then in step 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And, you know, I told you I was raised in this family. I had faith, and I loved God, and I believed in God, and I knew there was a God. And I've always been a seeker of God from when I was just a really, really young child. And not just because of my parents, I don't think. It was just something that was in me. And I always wanted to know God. But I'll tell you something that I didn't really understand, and that was how to trust God. You know, so I came in here, and you tell me, and then you start telling me that he's going to restore me to sanity. I was very upset about that, because I had gone to therapy for so many years and said, I'm not crazy, because I was sure I was crazy. Well, I was a little bit crazy. But the insanity that they're referring to in here, I believe, is the insanity that we believe that we can drink again. You know, it tells us in our book that, you know, we forget what it was like just a day ago or yesterday or a week ago, and we just drink again. And I look at that sometimes and I think, gosh, I mean, I can remember, oh gosh, I'm thinking of a time right now. My parents were here, we were for a wedding, and we were down in Phoenix, and we were at that wedding, and I was drinking vodka and cranberry juice, and I got so hungover. But of course, I just said I got food poisoning or something. As I laid on my bed, well, my parents are in my home from Michigan, passed out, just drunk. You know, and I think about that, and I just think how I still could never see that alcohol was the problem. It was my solution, that's why. So what I find in step 2 is that we have hope, and that's why I always want people to hear something. Maybe it's not me, maybe it's the person sitting next to you. Find hope here and just keep coming back. There's another guy, he's got a long time, he's got 57 years, and he didn't do the steps for the first 10, 12 years of his sobriety. He says, but just you keep coming back here. He says, we'll get you, because if you just don't drink and you keep coming back here, something will change. And I believe that's true, but it's a little easier if you work the steps, and it's a whole lot easier if you don't pick up the drink, because then you get together and get to have a chain link of things, and they all come together, and life gets better. It may not be everything you want, but life gets better. I have a great life today. I get to have my children in my life. I'm really grateful because my children support me, they love me, and my family of origin, they love me, and that's something that I don't take lightly. That's truly a gift. And then in step 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. So guess what? That's why I say you can find God. Just keep seeking him. He's there. He's seeking you. And he's there, but he doesn't push himself on you. You get to come and find him. And I think about that one, and I think really all that we're doing there is making a decision. We're just making a decision, and that's all. And I believe, for me personally, I believe I have to make that decision on a daily basis. It says that we have, our sobriety is contingent upon a fit spiritual condition. And so I try to connect to that power greater than myself that I call God on a daily basis. And I do it by meetings, I do it by my readings, and I do it calling people. I mean, there's lots of ways. We have tools, guys, we have tools. And if you hear nothing else from me today, I hope you hear that there's a solution, because that's what I found here. And so we need to have that faith, and that's what step 3 is about us having faith. And for me, it was about, because I had the faith, but I didn't know how to trust God, and you guys taught me how to trust God. I remember I was at a big book study, and my sponsor, when we read that chapter on agnostics, and I'm like, I'm not an agnostic. I've always believed in God. I'm not an agnostic. She says, well, Lucy, you're always telling me you don't trust. You don't trust God. You don't trust that he's there for you. Because, see, I knew he was there, but he was there for you guys, because you had big problem, and mine were really small in comparison. And the truth is that whatever's going on in your life, It's a big deal. That matters to you, and it matters to God. And so just always remember that, because each one of us is here for a purpose. We each have something that we're on this earth for that only you get to fulfill. So I hope that you will find that. And so I thank you for that. I thank you and all the people that were there. I thank my sponsor for helping me to see that's agnostic when you say you believe in God, but you don't trust God. So then I began on that quest to trust God. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I trust God every single moment of every single day. I wish I did, but I can tell you that I trust God a whole lot more than I did when I walked into these rooms. And then in step 4, I made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And I think about that step, and what I always remember about that step was my very first 4th step. And I did it in a big book study. I love big book studies. I had them at my home, and I did them for 6, 7, 8 years at my home. And my sponsor, she used to be called the Big Book Nazi, and she really knows the big book. And she would always be at my big book studies, and we would just delve into that book, and people would be there, and newcomers and myself, and I just learned so much. And I keep promising my sponsees, and a few of them are in the room tonight, and some are on there, and I'm really grateful for them. But what I know is that it just helped me, because I began to understand what the big book was saying and what it was telling me, and it wasn't just a bunch of words on the page, but it became, like it says, if you work the steps until the steps work you. And I don't know how that works, but somehow they become part of your fiber, and you just kind of know, like, okay, I'm off track, I need to do this, or I need to call somebody, or maybe I blow up and get all upset or something, but I know pretty quickly that to get back onto track. And so when I think about that one, I think about perspective, and it takes a lot of courage to write out that 4th step and to be rigorously honest with yourself. But I also think it's about perspective, like how the way we see the world and our perception of things. And I just want to read you this quick little story. A friend shared this with me the other day, and it goes, there were these 2 twin boys, and they grew up with an alcoholic father. And one grew up to be an alcoholic, and when asked what happened, he said, I watched my father. The other grew up and never drank in his life. When he was asked what happened, he said, I watched my father. 2 boys, same dad, 2 different perspectives. And when I heard that, it was my friend gave it to me. We were out hiking, and she told me that, and I go, wow, that's so powerful. It's so powerful, because I'm not an alcoholic because I saw my brothers and sisters drinking a lot. I'm not an alcoholic because I had a husband who had PTSD. I'm not an alcoholic because I got divorced and my husband left me. I don't know. I believe that something in us is different. I don't know exactly what that is. It's mental, physical, spiritual. Our solution is spiritual, though. And, I know, like, I can remember the physical, because I always wanted more and more and more and more of it. And I remember the mental, because I can remember at work. I can remember when it was, like, getting to be 3 o'clock, and I got off at 4. I was thinking where I was going to go buy my booze. But then all of a sudden it was 2 o'clock, and it was 1 o'clock. And then I think I went to work thinking about where I was going to buy my booze that night. So I know that that's all there. And then spiritually, I think it's because where I think we're alike is that we die inside. Our spirit dies, and that's where our life is in our spirit. And I think about that as, like, if I were to drink again, I really do believe I would die. Now, I don't know if I would die like in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I could if I get in the car and do something stupid. But what I know would die really quickly would be my spirit. And I'm telling you, I can't live without my spirit, because that's where I get my strength. That's where I get my ability to come here and stand before you. This is not real easy for me. I'm kind of a quiet, shyer kind of person, and rather private. And yet here I'm telling you, some of my inside gut stuff. But there is one thing in the big book too, on page 66. It goes, if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be for the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. And, you know, that's what I think of alcohol as poison, and anger and resentment is poison. It doesn't mean we aren't going to get angry. That's something that I had to learn too. It's what are you going to do with the anger? Like, am I going to be angry at you, or am I going to use that anger for me? Because everything that we have inside of us is there for us. And so I try to remember that, and I need you guys to help me. That's why I keep coming back here too. And then 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. You know, telling another human being the things that are going on inside of you, that's not a real easy thing. It tells us there that, you know, most of us don't want to do that. I really don't know anybody that wants to do that, quite honestly. But what I do know is that when I did it, I had a freedom, because my sponsor was very loving and gracious and kind, and then she actually told me things about herself. And then I realized I'm not really all that unique. And, you know, we all have different stories, and there's different degrees of what we did out there. But I can promise you that you haven't done anything that can't be forgiven, and that God can't love you, and that we would love you. I think that's one of our gifts too here, is that we come into these rooms, and I don't know about you, but I didn't feel real good about myself. I was full of fear, and I thought I was so different from the rest of the world, and I didn't know how I was ever going to be able to stop drinking. And yet I came in here, and you were kind to me, and told me to come back. And people, like at that first meeting, those 3 people, I'm telling you, they came up and they talked to me, and all of a sudden I didn't feel so alone. And I just, by the grace of God, I just kept coming back. I kept coming back and listening. I was willing. I was so willing. I just did whatever they told me to do. And so it takes integrity to be able to tell somebody your things and to clean up the wreckage in your life. But then guess what? You get to walk down the street. You don't have to be looking back behind you and saying, oh gosh, what if they see me, you know, because you're clean, you know, you're telling somebody about your stuff. And then we go to step 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. You know, and I made those lists, and I made the list of my defects of character. And, you know, in the big book, so just those 2 little paragraphs, you know, so it's like, well, that's no big deal, you know. But I think this is like me. You know, you just got to be doing this every day of your life. It's never finished. My father lived to 103, and I often use my father as an example because I watched my father. He showed me how to live. He showed me how to die. And one of the things my father did is that he always reached for God. He always told me to trust in God. But I just watched him, and when he was 100, I remember saying to him, Dad, how do you get out of bed? He goes, well, you know, I'm still here, so God must have something for me to do yet. He's 100. And then he also said, and I did it one day at a time. And I'm newly sober, mind you. And I go, wow, Dad, I just learning about that. I never heard that before. I don't remember him saying that to me as a child or anything like that. I learned so much from him, though. If you ever sit with me, I could tell you stories about him all day. But anyway, that takes a lot of willingness to be able to look at your defects of character. And I will tell you one of my biggest, and I struggle with this one, and it comes up and raises its ugly head in my face sometimes. And it's that I do a lot of comparison. I compare myself to everyone. Most of the time it's comparing myself and thinking I'm a piece of crap or something, but sometimes I might think I'm a little bit better. But our book teaches us that we just need to get right-sized. And that really caused me harm, you know, because when I came into these rooms, I couldn't come into these rooms. I kept saying, there's no way I can be an alcoholic because I didn't start drinking young like my brothers and sisters. I don't drink as much as them. I haven't drank as long as them. There's no way I'm an alcoholic. And by the way, I'm not controlling either, because look at my sisters, how controlling they are. And, you know, the truth of all that is that it kept me from being able to really see what was going on in my life. And today, because I know that that's not really helpful to me, I try to be aware of that. And then we humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings. So we are not the ones that remove them. We ask God to. We can list them, and I listed mine, and I remember writing the opposites of all my shortcomings and my defects of character. And then I seek to live my life closer to what was over here, what was the difference. I'm going to promise you don't have to be perfect. There's a line in the big book, one of my most favorite. It's spiritual progress, and I love the word spiritual in front of that, because not everybody always says that. not spiritual perfection. So it's just that we have to keep seeking. We always want to enlarge our spiritual life because that's when we're going to grow. And it takes humility to be able to do that. And I also have a belief that all of our defects of character are really, it tells us this again in the book. You can tell I read the book a lot. I read the 12 and 12 a lot because that's where I found my answers. And what I know is that what we have is God-given. So it's not that they're bad. We take them to the excess. You know, we take our defects of character, we take them to the excess. Like, I used to work in human resources, and they used to have a question, you know, tell me one of your strengths, and then tell me one of your weaknesses, really old school human resources. But you were always supposed to take your weakness and turn it into a strength. So if you're going for a job and they ask you that question, turn your weakness into a strength. So I am very organized, and so sometimes I drive people crazy. But because I'm very organized, I can keep things in order, and I can get things done. You know, so you turn it into a strength. But we take that, and then we take it, and we use it to the, I guess, the negative, if you would, because we take it to the other side. But it can be removed. I haven't found for me personally that they've ever been permanently removed. I wish some of them would be, but they're not. But I keep striving for that spiritual perfection. Spiritual progress. Step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. So we make that list, you know, and usually that comes out of our step 4. And when we make amends, you know, all we're doing in 8 is just writing our list. And, you know, you can put all your fears aside because guess what? If you're in this room and you've worked the steps, we've all done it. And we've all got the same hesitations, and we don't want anybody to know. And we don't want to, who wants to go and say, you know, they caused me harm. Those people caused me harm, but I got to go and tell them, you know, I'm making amends. You know, I didn't quite understand that, but maybe that's why that's brotherly love there. And, if you've been in meetings with me, I say this sometimes, but there was a song back in the 70s called What the World Needs Now is Love, Sweet Love. And I love that song. Dionne Warwick sings it. And one of the reasons I love it is because that is what our world needs. And if you look around our world right now, that's what it really needs. And guess what, guys? We got a secret. We've got something the rest of them don't have. Because we got each other, and we have a tool that helps us to look at our similarities, not our differences. We have a power greater than ourselves to come in and help us, and we have each other. And if we can take that to the world, I'm telling you, one person can change the world, and you might be the one. So get out there and do what God has called you to do. And then we have 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And that takes some discipline to do that. And what I've found with that as well is that work closely with your sponsor when you're making amends. Recently, I talked to her, well, recently meaning last year, I was talking to her about, you know, feeling I needed to make an amends, and she said to me, she goes, what harm did you cause? So you need to be clear what the harm is that you caused. And you got to be sure that if you make the amends, you're not going to cause more harm to that individual. And so your sponsor's your guide. You know, a lot of us come in here and we read the steps and go, God, I got that done, you know. I mean, I did that. I read them and I thought, that's not so hard. That isn't really difficult. But then when you dig in, there is some challenges, but it's worth it. It's worth it. The work is worth it. And then we have step 10, and I had no idea that I could talk about this long. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. That takes perseverance, and that's a daily thing. I'm not going to tell you that I sit down every single night and do that, but during the day I catch myself. Sometimes at night I do it, you know, like an official 10 step. And one of the things I'd like to encourage you to do is to look at what you did well. Because I'm pretty good at beating myself up, maybe you are too, but I'm not always good at seeing what I've done well. So, and I'm sure everyone in here has done something today that was really good. And I hope you look at that tonight before you go to bed and remember that. And sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. And that's our spirituality, and so we have to be willing to do that. Take a few minutes each day. It doesn't have to be something real formal, and if you think that your mind is going to shut off when you're meditating, forget it, because it's probably not going to do that. But it's the stillness, because guess what? That's where you hear God. It's in the quietness of the day, that's where you hear him. Go out on the hike, because that's my favorite place to meditate personally. And then 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And that's service. And when we do these steps, we're promised that we will have a spiritual awakening. And that's what happens. If you're willing to do the work, you will have that spiritual awakening. And, you know, I just think about so many things, and now I realize I could go on for a long, long time, but I won't. But, you know, in 2020, we all had a lot of really, really difficult things, and many of you have heard, and one of my friends here, I saw posted it. You know, they always say 2020 is, you know, hindsight, and really 2020 is behind us now. It doesn't mean today everything's all different from 2020, because we got a lot of challenges ahead. But you know what? If you stayed sober through that year, God bless you, that's amazing. If you got sober in the park, or you got sober anywhere on Zoom, that's going to be a pretty good story. I mean, nobody that has any time can say that, because we didn't get sober. I mean, you might have had meetings in the park, but not the way we were having meetings in the park. We didn't have Zoom. We had each other. I'm not sure I could have done it. I needed people. I need hugs. I need people in my life. And I'm not sure I could have done it, but I've seen people do it, and I'm going to say that in the park this summer, I was blessed to sponsor many women. At the beginning, there were not very many women coming to the park, but there were women coming needing sobriety. And so somehow I ended up with a lot of sponsees. I mean, I've never had as many sponsees as I had last year. But I'm going to tell you something. Those women saved my life, and I don't know what I gave them, but I know what they gave me. They gave me my life, and they gave me a sense of purpose, and they helped me to get back into my book and to get back in to where I started, because really I think everything I know, I learned it in that first year, but all I do is keep expanding that, because I want to, as was said earlier, our friend Patrick, God rest his soul, died sober, and that's the way I want to go. And I love Patrick, and Patrick always said he was a recovering alcoholic. So for Patrick, I'm going to say that I'm a recovering alcoholic. And I also like to remember to keep this very simple, because we're powerless over alcohol, but our book was given to us to give us a power. So when you find God, you will find your power, and then you'll be able to go out and walk into the world. But keep it simple, because we're complicated people that like to complicate things. But I always say, don't drink, trust God, clean house, and work with others. God bless you. I love you. God loves you. Keep coming back.
Gotta have my glasses. All right, so let's thank Lucy one more time.